All right, we're live. Welcome to Film Trooper Presents Film Marketing Fridays. And I'm going to stop this real quick so you can see my big fat head. Hey, everybody, I'm a fellow film trooper. And at Film Trooper, I especially the uber independent filmmaker who's going to sell it directly online. And all I try to do is curate and learn from the strategies and techniques used by successful online entrepreneurs, if I can even say the word, um, to see how they sell digital products and how that could be applied when we're selling, which is the real big thing here is that film production really is no longer a barrier because anybody can make a film, obviously. I mean, this feature film that I made was made for $500 with no crew, so it was like, okay, yeah, the barrier has been broken. Done deal. Then distribution it really is no longer a barrier as well because anybody, like this film, you can upload it to, I sell this on Vimeo on demand, or VHX, or Distify, or aggregator, it onto iTunes, Amazon, Google Play. So distribution, getting your film out to the whole world is no longer a barrier, which is just have been that's just amazing to me. So really, the only last barrier that we have as filmmakers is marketing, which is why I started this live Google Hangout sessions every Friday to try to answer these questions and try to curate the best answers. And I say curate because I'm no expert. I'm just a big enthusiast about this type of things. And by you guys asking me questions, I about what the best answers could possibly be. But we're in luck today because our guest is Chris Reed, and everybody, you're out in.
Yep. Hey guys. Hi, I'm Chris.
So Chris, yeah, Chris is real quick. We had met over Twitter because Chris called. The short of it, he called me out on 2 episodes ago because I had misrepresented the lawsuit that was going on with the Gravity. This particular screenwriter and author and doctor had written basically the story for Gravity, sold it to a division of like New Line, which was eventually acquired by Warner Brothers, who eventually made the movie Gravity. And her book was literally called Gravity, and she didn't receive any, I guess, revenue or something through the success of the film. So there was this lawsuit about clarify what the lawsuit really meant, and Chris was very good at pointing that out to me. In the process of talking to each other on Twitter, he mentioned that as he calls himself, he's a recovering digital marketer, and I'll let Chris tell us a little bit about his background and has some really great things to offer today on today's show. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so just a little very short brief on my background is I've been working in film and media production for a very long time since I was, really young, and I've helped out on film sets since I was a teenager. And then I ended up living in London doing film set stuff and photo production stuff, and then I moved to New York. And after a few years of living in New York doing the film thing, an artist who I really respect and knew from just kind of hanging out in places where artists hang out in New York was starting a business based around selling jewelry, and we got to talking, and I was like, hey, there's this new thing called Twitter, and that jewelry business you started that isn't doing well. I think Twitter will help you with it. And he was like, well, I don't know anything about that. And I was like, oh, I do. You can hire me, and I will and I will market your business. So I kind of got paid to learn digital marketing working with him, and we built a pretty successful little business over a couple of years for him. And then I left, and I worked with Red Bull on the Red Bull Music Academy in New York, which was a really huge event and really awesome. And since then, I moved on. I've done a couple other projects with Red Bull. I've helped some small brands and startups get out there on the internet. And I also do to client video production. I direct, digital content and TV ads. So that's me.
Yeah, very cool. So we're going to take some of that experience. Definitely, like you said, the Red Bull was a big campaign. You mentioned that I think you grew it to like in 1 month, 50,000, followers on Twitter, and all that kind of stuff. So utilizing your experience, we can kind of delve right into the questions because I showed you earlier. It's quite a bit of questions, but I think we're all ready for it. I think people that had submitted questions via Google Plus and Facebook and Twitter. So with that said, I'm going to shoot it over to the slide deck, and then we'll go back and forth to answer your questions. Too far down the questions, like it says here, today is our community questions. I understand really sort of the three basic elements of any sale, or basically any business. I probably should have categorized that as business versus sale, but that's what you're doing in a business. You got to make sales. So you either have what you're offering, additionally it out to your customers or your audience, and then you have to have a marketing method that communicates what you're actually selling. So to take that into more detail, a little bit more detail, your product or service must provide a value, right? It has to have something. It has to have worth. And then this comes down to your film. Is your film any good? You know, does it? The means that an audience can easily acquire your product. You know, is your film on the platforms that make it easy for audiences to pay and watch for your film? And hopefully it's a good film. And then marketing equals the form of communication that is in alignment with the customer's expectation of your product's value. And that's important because you might have this uber independent film made, you know, but if the customer's expectation is like, I'm used to paying for like Blockbuster at like $2.99 or $3.99 a rental, and then you're asking me to pay $5, $10 for this uber independent film, you know, so you have to make sure that your marketing message is in alignment with what the customers expect from you. And this is something that Chris and I were talking about earlier. Actually, it's really about providing value, and we're going to show you this case study here. You alone control whether or not your film has any value. I don't know if anybody's ever heard this film called The Room. It has been called the worst movie ever made. And the difference, the value that it provided, it was like midnight screenings where audiences came around because they wanted to have a shared experience and they wanted to have a shared laugh. And that's what the difference is. The movie wasn't good, but the value was worth something. And you can, you know, read more about this film at the roommovie.com. But I want to pop over to, before we get into the sort of the what's the next thing. Oh yeah, I want to talk about this unfair advantage because that's what this is. And I'm going to stop this deck here so you can see my face and go back to Chris. So in your experience, you know, doing digital marketing stuff like that, you've mentioned to me about the unfair advantage, and that's what this is like providing value. And does your film provide value, even if it's not a good film, that kind of thing. So if you kind of elaborate that a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, well, so there's two kinds of. Can you guys hear me? It's not doing.
I hear you just fine. You sound great.
Yeah, so there's basically two kinds of unfair advantages. There's the unfair advantage that your product has, and that, you know, in this case, your film product. And then there's also the unfair advantages that you as the producer or director or filmmaker, however you want to refer to yourself as. And so basically what that is it's your point of distinction, and it's the thing that no one else can rival you at. So for The Room, their entire marketing message is that it's the worst movie ever made, and that's their unfair advantage. And now, like, no one, and you know, that was really genius because no one's out there. Everyone's out there going, my movie's really good, go watch my movie, and they're like, our movie's the worst. It sucks. Don't watch it. And people are like, oh wait, like, and then that message resonates because it's different, so that gives them an unfair advantage. And now they own that space, and now they own the worst movie ever made space. And then so how you kind of just figure out what the unfair advantage of your film is you look at yourself as a filmmaker, and you look at like your audience before you even start making a film. You look at the audience and you're like, okay, who's out there? What is the audience for the uber independent film that I'm going to make. And, the audience for one that I might make is probably different than the audience that you might make because, we're different people. We have different connections. We're into different things. And it's going to be a niche audience, and it should probably be a niche that you have an authentic connection with. Like, you should make a movie about something you are actually into. um,
Yeah, because you're going to be in it for the long haul. So
because this process takes a really long time. Um, and if you are doing it for the money and you're making a uber independent film, you might make some money off of it, but it's probably not worth doing if it's not also for the love. Um, so you should be in a space where you have an authentic connection, and so that could be one of your unfair advantages. Is you're like, I'm the only person making a film that has an authentic connection to this hobby that I have or this niche that I am a part of. Um, and then you also have to look at yourself as the filmmaker and be like, okay, what unfair advantages do I have that can push this film? Like, if my film's a comedy and I am really great, like, and honestly, like, you have to be honest with yourself here. It's like you're honestly really clever, you're really good at snappy one-liners, then your comedy film should have a really great Twitter account filled with snappy one-liners, and that way you can kind of show, because you need to build trust in your audience. You need to show them that your film is worth watching and worth buying, and one of the best ways to do that is through your content marketing. So again, your comedy film and your Twitter account filled with snappy one-liners, people are like, oh, this guy can make me laugh on Twitter. It's more likely that he can make me laugh in a movie than someone who can't even make me laugh on Twitter. And Twitter's free, and his movie costs like $19.99 or $9.99 or whatever you're selling your movie for. So there's that. Or the other thing is, if you manage to get like really great, well-composed shots, and that's the touch point of your movie, and you're managing to do that on a $0 budget, which we all know is incredibly difficult. But like, let's say you have that skill. Let's say maybe you went to film school for cinematography, maybe you've worked on professional sets, or maybe you're just really talented at that sort of thing. And you can also kind of translate that skill down, and you can do the same really great kind of cinematic feeling shots with your iPhone, and then your film will have this really great Instagram presence, and you should be referencing the same things and the same moods, and people will be like, wow, this guy's Instagram is really beautiful, and he's talking with other really influential Instagram photographers, and he's got this movie, and I really like his visual style, and so I trust that that visual style will carry into his movie. I will go pay my $10 or $20 to watch his movie now.
yeah, definitely. There's some good stuff there, and it corresponds to the slide deck, which I'll jump into right now again. So some really great points in there, so if everybody can see this, and that's what he was saying. Your unfair advantage you have to assess, and you take inventory of what your strengths are, because then you have to ask that question: are your strengths in alignment with your overall film story or the film's marketing message, which Chris brought up, which you brought up, Chris, about the Twitter thing. Like, if you have a comedy and if you have a bunch of great one-liners and 140 characters or less in Twitter, you're going to show your comedic strength, and that's an alignment, but that's something showing that you have that telling a great joke. And so it is in alignment with eventually what you're selling, which is your film product. So with that said, right into the users' questions, which we had quite a few, so we're going to answer your questions right now. Dun, 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 dun. First question up, this question, and there's two other questions, so they're fairly in the same, genre, or how do you call it? So this one is like, how do I get more viewerships? That's pretty point, Actually, exclamation point instead of like a question mark. He was like, damn it, how do I get viewership? And that's from one Liad. I can't spell it. Liad? Liad?
I want to call him Iliad, like
Oh, I see what he did there.
Like Iliad in the Odyssey.
I think that with the one, he'll play there. Very good. So how do I get more viewerships is a question, but this was sort of the same thing. What would be the best way to get a wider demographic to see, the film when the film itself might steer towards a certain audience? Again, that's like, how do you get more viewership outside of your targeted audience? And that's from Jake Taylor at the Mellow Madman over at Twitter. And then we have the last of the questions that kind of came in was, audience outside your target demographic when it comes to marketing your film. And that's from Nick Garcia _always Nick. So with that said, that's a big question. Like, well, how do you get a bigger reach? How do you get more viewerships? That's sort of the big elephant in the room, and we can do it based off the old this old saying we had at Sony PlayStation when we're dealing with trying to create cinematic sequences for our clients. We had to tell them, well, you could have it fast, you could have it cheap, but you have and Hollywood, they have if they want to make a good marketing campaign and if they want to have some impact and they need to move fast, it's not going to be cheap for them. They're going to have to spend some money. And that's the advantage, the unfair advantage they have over the uber independent filmmakers. But the uber independent filmmakers, if they can't spend money, then they can't use the word cheap. They can't, if they want to be cheap, but they want to be good, they're not going to be able to go fast.
And I mean, even with the studio films and all the money that they do have, they kind of get in their own way with that a little bit because they're going for these super broad targets. I mean, when you're in the studio marketing world, people talk about quadrants, and there's 4 quadrants. There's women under 25, women over 25, men under 25, men over 25. And that's, I mean, they get a little bit tighter with their marketing than that, but that's kind of where they're looking at. And so they're doing things like they're buying billboards, and they're, buying a billboard in Times Square in New York, and 8 million people are seeing it. But if you have a film that really only appeals to, say, girls 16 to 20, yeah, like a billboard in Times Square might not be the best place to target your marketing, whereas you can talk to those people on Facebook or on Instagram or on Twitter, which is where like they actually hang out.
Yeah, it's definitely.
And you can do that for way less money than you can do a billboard in Times Square.
So you have to get really smart and targeted with your marketing message. So fast, good, or cheap, you got to pick 2. Again, this whole thing, if you already have a small group or you have a small audience that you have targeted into, again, the questions that came in, could those people become advocates? And that's sort of what you're trying to get, those true ravenous fans of what you've done. Can they be used to help promote what you've done? Again, the marketing message then has to become native, as Chris was kind of elaborating on. And Chris, if you kind of tell us a little bit more about what this means about being native to the marketing message being native.
Yeah, I mean, so basically what it means is that your entire I kind of want to introduce the concept of strategic thinking here, which is probably one of the most powerful marketing tools there is your ability to think strategically, which is basically thinking with the end in mind. So you set your reasonable goal, whatever that is, and let's just say it's I want to make some money back off of my uber independent film, which, that's a surprisingly difficult thing to do, but it's not unreasonable, so that's my reasonable goal. And that will drive everything I do from the very beginning of like, what am I going to make a film about? I'm going to make a film that people want to watch and will pay to watch. And then so as you go through every step you take in the process, you should kind of give yourself that thinking of what is my goal for this action I am about to embark on? Where am I now? And then the difference between where you are now and where your goal is should give you some key steps along the way that you will take. So let's say you finished your film and you're like, okay, I want to gain some more viewership. So you're like, what I need to do is I need to communicate my film to people. And how do I communicate my film to the people that actually want to watch it, and how do I not turn them off or scare them away, and how do I know that my marketing is good? And to get into that, I'm going to share with you guys an example of some really terrible marketing that I noticed very recently. I'm not as good as Scott at the screen share, so there might be a minute where this doesn't fill up the whole screen.
Yeah,
all right, so everyone can see this, right? This is bad marketing.
We saw it for a second. Hold on
Whoops,
a second.
did it go away?
Yeah, do it again.
Are we back? There we go.
We're back.
All right, yeah. So here's an example of bad marketing that I've run into really recently is Lincoln Motor Company, which, the car of the mafia, is doing this musical selfie campaign. And the problem with this is Lincoln is a luxury car, and cars are an expensive product that you want to be able to last a really long time, whereas a selfie is the cheapest, most accessible, and most disposable form of content. So obviously that's not really aligned with a luxury brand, an exclusive brand. And then we also have to think of like, all right, what's the target audience for a selfie machine? And who are the people that take the most selfies? And I haven't gone and done rigorous scientific surveys here, but I'm going to say it's girls between the age of 12, 13 to like 22, 23. I'm going to say they're taking the majority of the selfies on the internet, followed by men in that same age range. And I'm also going to say that people between the ages of 12 and 23 are probably buying the fewest Lincolns.
I agree.
Again, I haven't done a rigorous scientific survey, but that's where I'm coming at with my thinking on this. So not only is it not aligned with their brand, but it's not aligned with their target. And then it also adds no value. And there's this big thing like Seth Godin and a lot of other great marketers talk about, your marketing needs to add value. And the basic point there is if no one would pay for it, it has no value. So if I'm not going to buy and I wouldn't buy a musical selfie machine, I very well might buy a Lincoln in the near future, but I'm definitely not going to pay for a musical selfie machine, and I don't really think I know anyone who would. So therefore, it doesn't have a value, and it doesn't add it. And then I want to share with you guys an example of the best marketing I've seen recently, which is the Robert Downey Jr. giving the Iron Man bionic arm to this kid. And this is such great marketing that when CNN reported it, they reported it as news.
That is some good marketing.
I don't know why CNN thinks I'm in Atlanta or Charlotte or Washington, D.C., because I'm in New England right now. But when I grabbed the screen cap off of CNN's website, they thought I was in Atlanta. And so, but this is really great marketing, and it's marketing that's so good that people have confused it with news. And let's kind of walk through why it's amazing. It's perfectly on target for Marvel, who's funding it, so that's who the marketing is for. It's perfectly on target for Marvel because Marvel is a brand that's all about superheroes. And what Robert Downey Jr. did is he gave a kid who is missing most of his right arm a working robotic Iron Man arm, and they partnered with some leading medical technology guys to do that for this kid. And Marvel's about being superheroes. Robert Downey Jr. just became this kid's hero in a really big way. So there's perfect alignment between the message of we make movies about superheroes. We just did a real life heroic thing for this kid.
And the robotic arm that was designed was specifically looks like Iron Man's arm, so that's why it was perfect alignment.
It's an Iron Man arm. It's in perfect alignment, and Robert Downey Jr. the whole time stays in character as Tony Stark, which is another great alignment because now he's acting the whole time and he's improvising, and it showcases how great of an actor Robert Downey Jr. actually is because he's able to do this really amazing thing for this kid in this highly emotional situation and still play Tony Stark as if it was scripted on the page in front of him. So there's all kinds of alignment up and down the line for that brand, for that movie. And it's also really subtle when you watch kind of the clip, like, yeah, it's the Iron Man arm, everyone knows about it. Robert Downey Jr. introduces him as Tony Stark. Most people know Tony Stark is, Iron Man. They have some little metal cases as you watch the video that say Iron Man on it, and that's all of the branding. It's very well placed, it's not obnoxious, so it doesn't feel intrusive in the life of the viewer. And it adds tremendous value, and it adds tremendous value in a lot of ways. It's obviously tremendously valuable to this kid who got a robotic arm where he had no arm. So there's a great tremendous value to him. There's a tremendous value to society because it helped advance some medical research. So, if any of us happen to lose an arm, there's more money going into research to replace it. And it's valuable to all of us watching it because it's entertaining. And it is a really entertaining video, and it's cute and charming, and people pay for entertainment. I mean, that's the theory we're all working on when we're trying to sell movies, is that people pay for entertainment. So that's why that is great marketing and why the Lincoln musical selfie thing is not so great marketing.
Yeah, so it's fantastic you brought that up because most people are going to think like, oh, that's cool. I mean, they have big budgets and stuff like that. So how does like an Uber independent filmmaker, even match with that? So let me go back to this slide share real quick and keep rocking here. So that's where you talk about like marketing message becomes native. And another way to talk about being native is just simply understanding like how people talk on Twitter, how people react on Twitter is maybe different than Instagram because obviously Instagram is all photos. So the language that's being spoken on these platforms, you have to understand what works and then speak natively. You don't want to just take one marketing campaign like a Facebook post and blast that into Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, whatever, Google Plus, because it may not translate correctly. You might miss the mark. So you have to each platform become native in that respect. Messages in alignment. And here's really the answer that I think people are looking for when on top of all this stuff is really important to understand. But really, for any Uber independent filmmaker to get better views, to get more views onto their film, or to branch out from their niche audience to go to traffic, answer these three specific questions. You need to partner up with an influencer who has the audience you want. And in business, they call it joint venture. And the reality, you have to add value to the. You're either going to add value or you're not. And so, as Chris was talking about in terms of the Iron Man campaign, there was so much value on top of value. Definitely the marketing machines to get Marvel, get you excited about the Avengers 2 coming out, the philanthropic efforts of this study in terms of robotics for amputees. All this stuff just was value on top of value on top of value, where Chris, like you pointed out on the Lincoln stuff, didn't offer any value on top of any value. And so for us Uber independent filmmakers, we have to decide like, well, my film would, too bad I don't have that audience. Like say somebody is a really popular in marathon running or something like that, and they have like this great blog, they have a huge audience, and you made like a documentary on marathon running, and you're just hoping that you can get that film to that same audience. So how do you do it without being really pushy, And so that's why we talk about you've got to partner up with these influencers, and you've got to offer value, and only you can decide, taking inventory of what unfair advantage you have, to give yourself the best fighting chance to expound upon your basically reach your film to get more looks and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I'm going to jump in here for a
Please.
minute. So I've done a lot of work with influencers. I think one of the great things about the digital era is it allows people who make cool stuff to access people who are good at talking about it, because just because we're good at making movies doesn't mean we're the best at selling them. And yeah, we have to work on that. We have to train that skill if we want to be successful. But we can also partner with people that are way better because they're influencers. So say I have an ultra marathon running documentary, and I want some major ultra marathoners to share it with their network. How do I do that? And we did this thing at Red Bull when we had the Red Bull Music Academy, and we really wanted to bring the New York City music scene out to our event. And we wanted to do that in a way that didn't seem like Red Bull was this big, giant brand spending a lot of money. Because, music people, they're like film people. Like, they really care about it being authentic. They care about it not looking like they've sold out. And so, these are the things you can learn from the big guys is, one, be as authentic as possible. Approach people with things that they care about. Approach a marathon runner with your film about running marathons. Don't approach them with your film about how awesome deep fried stuff is. Because that's not an authentic connection, and that's just going to piss them off. I mean, which might be your marketing tactic, is make them angry and they'll tweet about hating it. But so first you want to be as authentic as possible, and you want to approach people. The other thing you want to do, so if you're approaching an influencer, you just have to, at some point, you just have to ask. You just have to make that approach. Obviously, if you can get introduced to them by a mutual acquaintance, that's better than just shooting a cold email into their inbox. But even if you can't, shooting a cold email into their inbox is better than being like, oh, that guy would never open my email. Because you're right, they'll never open the email you don't send.
Yeah.
They might there's things you can do to make it more likely to open the email. Maybe try to engage with them on Twitter, Instagram, or wherever they seem the most open. See if you have mutual friends or other mutual interests. But at some point, like, you do just have to get over it and you have to ask. And then you ask as authentically as possible. You just come at them, and if you seem like a genuine human being who wants to connect with them on a genuine human level, and you don't seem like some dude who's just trying to push his film, so they'll push it for you, and you don't want to pay them, because a lot of them get paid for this, then they'll be more likely to do it for you. And then, of course, another thing is you want to use your unfair advantage here. Like, all these influencers get tons and tons of emails, and they get lots of emails that look very much the same. One of the things we did with the Red Bull Music Academy is we had access to some really amazing graphic designers at one of the best graphic ad agencies in New York, Doubleday and Cartwright. And so we had them make these awesome posters, and we sent these influencers packets of posters. Obviously, we didn't just mail it to them. We talked with them first. We're like, hi. We sent them an email and being like, hi, we want to mail you this poster. You might not have access to the best design agency in New York, but maybe you are a good graphic designer. Like, maybe that's your day job. You can do that. You can make an awesome poster, and you can reach out to them and be like, hey, I made a movie about running marathons, and I just want to send you the poster to my movie about running marathon. Oh, and by the way, here's a link where you can watch it on this private Vimeo for free, because I think you'd like it, and I just want to authentically share it with you because I think you're cool. And that's going to get you a lot further than being like, hey, will you please just tell your people about my movie for me, please, because I really want them to buy it.
Yeah. It's funny. So there's a tip, like, says to be authentic and asking. So to roll with this whole thing about you have a documentary marathon running, and there's several influencers or bloggers that have a large audience that that you could pay, but if you don't have money to pay, but what can you do to use your unfair advantage is, and what does it mean to provide value to an influenced? Maybe they have a book, maybe they wrote a book and that's part of the thing that's on their blog, my experience with the Boston Marathon or whatever it might be. If you're somebody who becomes the advocate for whatever they sell on their site, so this influencer, like, God, if I can get in front of that audience, how can you help supersize for this particular person? Like, maybe they know that you're always tweeting about their book. Maybe they know that you're always talking about it on Facebook. They're seeing like you're constantly advocating, and if you can try to help, gather on, then you have like an in. They know who you are, and you haven't asked for anything. You've just been offering help. So then you can also is the ask, but you can ask like, hey, so I had made this film, but I was curious. You're asking the influencer this, like, do you have any advice? Just quick one tip advice of like how I could definitely get it to more people or something, or how do I get it to these specific? It's kind of like a side angle of like saying, instead of like, hey, I'm a big fan of yours, can you please check out my film? It's more of like, people, there's something about being asked a question and asking your advice that people go, oh, you want I'll be a mentor to you real quick. Here's my advice for you, And then and what happens is it might force them to look at your trailer or your poster art or something and give them your 2 cents. And what happens is you start a dialogue. And then if pushy about it, there's an inadvertent way that you can get in to maximize your time with these influencers. And the reason why you want to find who you want to partner up with them is because that's the fastest way, when you have no money and no connections, to get your work, if it has value, to these people that have already spent years building up an audience and building up influence over the audience that you want. And so that was probably to answer the question as best we can in terms of how to get more viewerships, how do you get, break out of your niche audience and go to a wider demographic. Those are sort of the of how even the big guys do it, but this is how you can do it on an independent style online. But anyhow,
Yeah, and I'm back now, by the way.
I
I don't
saw
know
you
if you,
drop out.
yeah, I don't know if you guys noticed. For some reason, if anyone wants to provide some value to me, Chrome crashes on my MacBook like nobody's business, and I don't know why. So if anyone wants to, add some value to me and tell me how to fix that, that would be great. And I'll do something for you. But I think before we move on, I think that asking a question thing, that's really great, and you can I've used asking questions of people like major entertainment lawyers who are executive producers, and I've reached out with a question to them and gotten them to talk to me and opened a dialogue, and now we're talking about other projects that I have in development that, you ask for advice, you get money, you ask for money, you get advice. So that's, kind of a takeaway there. And, just before we move on, another really great way, this costs money, but not a lot. Another really great way to kind of reach your niche or break out of your niche is through super targeted um, advertising. And, there's lots of people out there who can get really tactical with you and can tell you, if you want to use Google AdWords, if you want to use Facebook, well, you can Google that. But what you really need to know when you're doing super targeted advertising is that your creative, your ad copy, and your picture, what goes in, what makes your ad, has to be really general. Like if I had an an Uber independent film, and I wanted to target Scott with an ad, and I had a Facebook ad, and had targeted it to Scott, and it was popping up on his feed, and it said, "Hey Scott, you like movies made for under $5,000? You should check out Blank, a film about nothing by Chris Reed." Like that's creepy. That knows too much about him. And like you know these things about your audience because you can choose your targeting based on what they like, and you can choose stuff like that. That's creepy. Scott's not going to like that. He's going to be like, "Whoa, this guy knows way too much about me." But if I have an ad where the copy is more general and it's just like Blank, a film about nothing by Chris Reed, made for almost nothing, Scott will be like, "Oh, I, have a podcast and I talk about Uber independent film all the time, and this one's popping up on my Facebook. I've discovered a new Uber independent film. Let me look at that, and if it's good, if it's adds value, I'm going to share my Uber independent film with my network of people who are interested in Uber independent films." And by the way, I don't have a film called Blank about nothing. That was just an example.
You
So
actually
you can feel free to go make a film called Blank about nothing if you want. That's not actually a thing.
you actually brought the really great point, which is the discovering. The way you craft your marketing messages and stuff like that. The marketing effort is really creative, and if you dive into it, I mean, filmmakers should not be shy about it or scared about it. It's going to be another skill that's going to have to be added on to all those general filmmaking skills that you've learned over the years. So the message, your artwork, your videos, your animated GIFs, or whatever it might be, to allow your audience to feel like they, like you said, do stuff, as opposed to being hammered over the head with a marketing message. That was great stuff. I'm going to keep going on with real quick the questions, because we have quite a bit to still get through, and everybody can see this. We have a question from Jane McConnell at Jane McConnell on Twitter. She says, ask, what guarantees does traditional film marketing provide in a splintered, highly segmented marketplace for on-demand web-only film content? And let me see here. What did I put into this thing here? Oh, this is where it leads to permission marketing. So her question is like, well, how does traditional film marketing, when you have such basically niche audiences, so how does traditional marketing even work? Well, it doesn't really. I mean, we're going to go into permission marketing. Permission marketing was coined by Seth Godin, and he has so many books. He's like an entrepreneur, a tremendous marketer, just somebody who has a lot of great information to talk about. So that's permission marketing. We could talk a little more about that. And again, value versus volume. And I want to talk about value versus volume and permission marketing real quick. So, well, I hear your Do you hear me? I hear an echo on yours, Chris.
Um, I hear you fine. I'll try to echo less.
Okay, sorry. Like
I don't, I
I
don't,
hear.
I don't really know what's going on, but
Okay.
I'll try to be less echoey.
S-
Um,
So we can go into like what permission marketing. The simplest way to think about it is traditional marketing of the studios is to push, to shout at you, to interrupt your viewing habits, your media advertisements. We're used to that in television. You're watching your show. Ah, dang it! There's a commercial break. The DVR, TiVo was infected. We got over that, and so marketers like, well, okay, well, how do we interrupt them again? Online, you remember the old days of banner ads popping up left and right? They're still around. Is does interrupt your experience. And Seth Godin was saying the new ways to do this to market to people is you have to provide them value, willing to accept whatever marketing message you're presenting to them. Case in point, Chris brought up the Iron Man bionic arm for the kid. It was done in such a way that the story was interesting. That if we went down that path, we'd be okay if they put a little ad saying Avengers 2 coming out, you know. So, oh hey
yeah,
Chris,
yeah, I'm still here. I think a big thing about permission marketing and adding the value versus volume thing becomes really important. And permission marketing, this new form, this non-traditional form of marketing, is basically the only thing that the uber independent filmmaker has access to them, which is good because it's super effective. And the most effective version is your email list, which is, why he gives away his free gear guide, which adds value to his community because people would pay, probably not a lot, but people would pay for a gear guide to make a film for under $5,000. He gives it away, he gets your email address. That email address is of value to him because that's your most, in marketing speak, we have a term called conversion. It means buying the thing you're selling. That's the most, you get the highest conversion rate from email addresses than you do from basically any other form of permission marketing. And so let's say you go out and you have a cool way and you collect a whole bunch of email addresses and you're like, cool, now I have a MailChimp or a Constant Contact list, and those are the ones that uber independent filmmakers should be using because they're cheap and they're good. Maybe I have a MailChimp or a Constant Contact list and I've got a few thousand people on it. I've got 2,000, 3,000 people. So great. Now I'm going to email them. Please buy my movie, and they're gonna go into their Gmail and they're going to filter you, and you are going to go straight to their spam box. Because you're not adding value, you're adding volume, and no one wants a higher volume of email.
yeah,
No one wants that. But everyone wants more valuable emails, and I read a lot of people's marketing emails, whether they're other filmmakers, other film blogs. I read a lot of marketing emails from business people because I see filmmaking as a business, I see creative work as a business, and I see myself as a business person on my own. And there's some I read. They email me every day, and I read them every day because they add great value to me. I like their point of view. And so, how do you do that with your film? Let's go back to the marathon documentary. Let's suppose that we've got a documentary on marathon running. If you've made a documentary on marathon running, chances are you know a lot about marathon running. Um, I'm actually a runner. I would really like to get emails in my inbox helping me learn to be a better runner. And if you had a film about marathon running and I had subscribed to your email list and you were giving me tips on running techniques because I don't have a running coach. And things that you'd be like, this is something you can check yourself. This is how you can avoid injuries as you push from your 5K to your 10K distance, or whatever it is that you really know and that you can honestly add value to these people. And again, in alignment to what your movie's on. So if you have a marathon running movie, you at least learned a lot about marathon running in the process of making that movie. Share that with people who are interested in marathon running.
yeah, definitely. So I mean, like you said, just because you have somebody email list, um, your job is to your job is to provide value in a wonderful transformative experience within that space of email. And then jumping on what volume versus value too, into not only email, but just like the whole business model of filmmaking or film sales. Because if Hollywood, they run off the volume sort of business parameter, because they have to sell a lot of transactions, they have to sell a lot of units to generate a lot of transactions to make up their money, you know. And the uber independent filmmaker won't be able to do that, so you can't play the volume game, but you can play the value game. And the value game is essentially, this is really the secret sauce, is for uber independent filmmakers, our films are nothing more than an advertisement for that we're going to sell something more expensive, like a $100 product. So the question you have to ask yourself is like, is my film to that? Is it only worth like $3, $4 rental? Is it only worth a Starbucks coffee? How can I create my film to generate $100 in sales for one transaction? And you do that by having your film be this advertisement for something of greater value. And like Chris was pointing out, if you're a marathon running documentary, what other great value does your film sort of spur conversation that you could sell? Like, here's the latest running shoe that you get a 50% discount. Instead of spending $250, $300, you get it only for $100 in film with that. So, oh shoot, hey, sorry, buddy. There you go. There you
go. And well, this comes down to knowing your market as well, is knowing what else you can sell them, because even really big businesses don't only sell one thing. Red Bull doesn't only sell energy drinks. Red Bull sells tickets to their Red Bull events. Red Bull, has media content. Red Bull sells T-shirts. And there's no reason why you can't take these lessons you're learning from large companies and do them on your own. And I mean, like George Lucas, who is probably the person who got the richest off of filmmaking without being a studio executive ever, straight up says it. He says, I made movies, I sell toys. And so, like, you know your audience, and you have to do, because in the uber independent film world, we're making films about things we have an authentic connection to. So chances are that if people share one of your niches, they share many of your niches. And so I know about my consumer because my consumer is basically me and my friends, and expanded to a wider group. Like, I know that I can sell my consumers fairly expensive t-shirts as long as they are very well designed, because the people that are that people that come from the sphere of influence that I come from really care about their t-shirts. It's just a thing that we do. And so I know that I can probably sell my target market like $40 to $50 t-shirts, but I also know that I can't sell my target market a coffee mug at any price. Like, it could be 99 cents. They're not going to buy it. They don't care about buying coffee mugs. Other people will be able to sell coffee mugs like Stax, like DFA Records, LCD Sound System, James Murphy's record label. James Murphy told me he makes more money off coffee mugs than he does off music, and James Murphy is a rock star.
And you'll hear that. You'll hear that all the time. Like, what we think like a musician or a filmmaker, like or George Foreman made all his money. The boxer made all his money off the Foreman grill. You know what I mean? So it's like, because he had celebrity status, he had built something prior. When it comes time to sell a product, that's where they make their cash. So it's something to think about in terms of film being advertisement or something different. Oh, hey, Chris, I hear my echo coming through, and then I'll unmute you. Oh, thanks. So what you'll do is hey, go ahead and mute yourself when you're not on, but when you're about to talk, just unmute it. I hear this echo coming through your line there. Rockin'. Okay. So we're going to keep going. This next question right here is it's a good one. Let's see here. This is from Aisha Talbert at Aisha Talbert on Twitter. She says, I'm from Canada, so I was wondering if you review of any particular differences between the indie filmmaking process in Canada versus the U.S. that I should note. So with that said, let's just but they're subset in industries. You have the Hollywood blockbusters that pretty much get like 90% press, and that's kind of what we film is the Hollywood's machine pumping out these massive movies. But then there's the indie Hollywood, which is kind of like your festivals and your press. So all the press that revolves around these festivals, the Cannes Film Festival, Sundance, Toronto, whatnot, and those are sort of like the award-winning dramas and documentaries that you're going to hear about Oscar time. But there is actually another indie Hollywood at the film markets, and this is when press really talks about. It's not part of the regular blogosphere. I just had this great interview with Scott Kirkpatrick, who's the director of distribution over at Mar Vista Entertainment. He just wrote a book helping screenwriters get their scripts noticed by Hollywood better, and he was basically explaining that there's this whole other subset industry that really drives a lot of like 80% of Hollywood, and these are the films that you see being brokered on Channel, Life Channel. These are the action stars of the 1980s or something like that still have a huge pull internationally. What you don't see in this world of film markets, you won't see dramas, you won't see comedies, because comedies don't translate well from like American comedy that has a lot of American references and has a lot of witty dialogue, don't necessarily translate to markets internationally across the world. Many years ago, the #1 comedic star of all markets was Rowan Atkinson, and because he doesn't say anything, a lot of his performances were all physical comedy, so it was a universal comedy that people could understand. So in this world of film markets, you're going to see like family entertainment, Christmas films, what Scott Kirkpatrick calls like women in peril, the Lifetime movies type things, and your action films, And he was mentioning like the horror market right now. Unfortunately, the horror films just oversaturated. Just like there's just way too many. But that's just in terms of what the market has to deal with. And then you have the international indies, which a lot of international states, or the state-funded or government-funded, the films that you see get to like the Oscar nominations. A lot of that's actually come the actual state itself because they want to display like their country has high levels of filmmaking talent and skill. But then the rest of us, we live in this world of what we call the uber independent filmmakers, which is like we're raising private capital, investment money, or crowdfunding money, or we saved money, or we made it for super cheap, and then we're using direct digital distribution as our method. So about the difference between like Canada and the U.S. That she would need to know is like if you're going to be playing in any of these, if you're going to be playing, whoops, go back to this one real quick. Sorry. If you're going to be playing in the indie world, know that are you playing in the film market world? Are you playing in the festivals to get the press? Are you working in a state-funded level, or are you truly an uber independent filmmaker working direct digital distribution? If that's the case, then it doesn't really matter where you live because the internet has global access, and maybe your only goal is to just get in on Netflix. And just recently, good God, I don't know if you saw this, but Netflix just announced that they're looking to roll out a different business model by just offering straight buyouts for certain films. So they bought this one film for like $12 million, which was like twice the budget of this particular film, and that's it. No back end, nothing like that. It's like a straight buyout. So that could be a whole different thing that's going to happen over the next few years. So the whole parameter. Answer Tasha's or her questions.
And yeah, before we move on, I just want to jump in on that. I want to jump in on that too. Like at the state-funded level, when you get outside of America, I've never tried to fund a movie in Canada, but I've worked on indie films in the UK when I used to live in London. At the state-funded level in the UK at least, and from what I hear from friends of mine who live and work in Canada, that there is higher access to grant money, to media foundation money, and just like your influencer will ignore all the emails you don't send, you get $0 from the grants you don't apply for. So, if you think you have a chance, put in the effort and go for these grants, especially if you live in a more grant happy place, or if you're doing documentaries, which tend to be more grantable, or if you have an unfair advantage where you are more likely to get a grant, use that unfair advantage.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, to hopefully answer your question, what world are you playing in? Are you, is your film project going to be more along the lines that could be attractive to state grants or government grants, or is something to, that on a film festival and so on? Up in Canada, if you want to check crafttruck.com, I think it is. They actually have a podcast called Craft Truck, but they have a whole thing called Business of Film. Jesse, I forget his last name. It's all very Canadian central, and he's always dealing with the independent film questions. So you might want to check out that podcast because it's called The Business of Film, and it's very Canadian focused. But hopefully that helps a little bit, knowing kind of what world you're dealing in. Like if you've got a family entertainment type thing, then you might be perfect for the film markets and that type of world. But if you have like a drama, then you might need to look at film labs or state or funded grants. And so, or if you're straight uber independent, like just by yourself, then you just got to learn the world of direct digital distribution, which essentially is anybody online selling anything on any digital product. So that's a whole different world that you need to look into in terms of how you're developing your project.
And while we're on the subject of genre, you really have to be careful with your genre. Like, okay, so let's say that you're like, all right, so I looked at this, and the world I'm in is I'm going to win South by Southwest. I am going to go win Sundance. I'm going to go win Cannes. So I'm going to go make a drama. And it's like, well, okay, you're right. Your meaningful drama would be more likely to win those festivals, but the drama genre requires really great acting talent, and it basically requires you to have some name actors who are actually good talent in there. So if that's not something that's accessible to you, you should maybe look at starting with a different genre and kind of building to the point where you can go out to that major festival winning drama, which is your dream film. Or, if you're looking at, you just kind of have to know what's accessible to you. And again, it's strategic thinking, it's working backwards. Because you kind of have two options when you're making a movie. You can raise a reasonable budget to make the movie that you want to make, or you can make a movie that you can reasonably afford to make. And you kind of have to have an honest assessment of where you are and what you have access to before you even start the process of getting into what kind of film am I going to make, what world do I want to play in.
Yeah, and you talk about strategic thinking. I mean, if you do take some time to look at like what films that you admire and really look at their trajectory towards success. Whiplash was a big thing. That was a short film that did really well and then had connections already through Sundance. Any of those major festivals, you have to nurture, you have to get in at some ground level to some extent with some work prior to essentially get grandfathered in to have a better fighting chance. A lot of those people from Sundance sometimes are part of the film Sundance Lab, and Tribeca now has a film lab. So they're nurturing filmmakers and putting them in the right place and with the right connections. So whatever work they have, they can feature in festival at its best. It's always the outlier. The press seems to on the dream of like this film was made in a garage up, accepted, and all the dreams come true. That really rarely happens. So
yeah. Well, yeah, I'm going to say something like that's a lie, and I think one of the anytime someone's like, I made this movie in my garage with no money, and it got distributed by a mini major or a major studio, like it's a lie. They didn't make that film for $7,000 in Mexico City. They made that film for $7,000 in Mexico City and then took it to a studio's post-production house and put it on their $1 million equipment and used their very skilled, very expensive technicians to basically remake the entire movie so it could be sold. So, well, now that I've gotten that rant out of the way, the other thing I wanted to say is, as we were talking about, like, the festival world, and you were kind of getting to a really important point where it's all about connections. And, I hear a lot of things from people being like, yeah, I know filmmaking is all about connections, but I don't have any connections. And it's like, so go make some. You get zero, like, you have to build a network. You have to go out and get connections. And, maybe you don't live in New York or LA. Maybe you don't even live in a city at all. Maybe you're in a small town somewhere. There's always things you can do. You can get on Twitter, you can get on the internet, you can join conversations that are already happening, you can add value there. You can get on LinkedIn, you can see who knows who, and you can ask for introductions. There's always ways that you can get connected. You can go to your local film festival and meet other filmmakers. You can go to a local acting class and meet people that want to act. If you understand how important connections are in the industry, which you should, because they are one of the most important things, there's really no excuse to not go out and make them at whatever level is accessible to you. Whether that's, getting into a major festival or going to an acting class in your local city or getting on Twitter and joining the conversation.
Yeah, and a lot of people, sometimes will volunteer at a festival, and you just kind of you want to get in good graces with sort of the decision makers, and then you always figure out what the incentive is for everybody involved, and where you can provide your value. But in terms of that dream, and unfortunately, that's sort of what all of us have been living with, and every generation it happens. It's sort of like you've heard about the pyramid schemes, these sales things, like the same ugly monster sort of pops up sorry, I bumped this thing again, every so often, and because it's selling the dream, and it's this in marketing, it's like sell the sizzle, not the steak. So don't get too caught up in it. Definitely do your homework to reverse engineer, like, really how did these films become successful, and like what's the common denominator. And a lot of it is because they can only get so far without help. They need help. They need that person to get that introduction. I have a great example, actually. If you a Film Trooper, I run this podcast, and you can be listened to on iTunes. But I interviewed Oren Peli. What happened to the experience of making that film. And although it was a the right place, the right time, but even Oren admits there's so many little things that had to happen. Like, there's an element of luck that has to happen to make those outlier stories blow up. I mean, the reality is like I said, with this particular situation, just because super successful doesn't mean everybody else after that see the same success. It just doesn't happen. So just something to keep in mind. But I'm going to keep going on the questions as we hit the hour mark, and hopefully we can wrap up in another half hour here. Let's see here. Go back to this. Okay, cool. Oh, yeah. So this is two questions here. You can see this. When you have a film with no stars or no names but a good story, what is the best way to market it? And that's from Oluyomi Osana at Ola the Scribe. So I probably butchered your name so badly, Olu, so I apologize. But this is a good question. At the same time, it's very similar to this particular from Fionn at FMJ Rain, which is first time to do a film experience. So it's basically, look, I have got how do I best market? What should I do? I forget. Oh, it's all about your execution. So what else is here? Oh, yeah. So it's all about your execution, and you want to take an inventory of what your strengths are. That's what you heard Chris and I talk about the entire show so far. Knowing what value and what's unfair advantage you can offer, and then you want to make sure that it has some sort of alignment with what your film story is or your film's message is. And what do we have here? Okay. So we can quickly answer that a little bit more. Like when you're starting out, especially if you don't have a star, again, genre helps. I guess the horror genre always works best when you don't have any stars, obviously. And just because you want to have a good story, we saw the case, the film case or film case study of The Room being the worst film ever made, had that unique selling proposition that made it successful on parameter. Stars. What the reason people goes why they need stars is because there's 5 obstacles to the sale, and this comes from Zig Ziglar. He says the customer has no need, there's no hurry, there's no desire, there's no trust, and I'm forgetting the last one, but the trust is the big one, because when you don't have any stars in your film,
the last one is no money.
Thank you,
which
no
means
money.
your pricing is.
Thank you, Chris. No money. So, but the big one, the no trust, is why people have stars. So when you're looking through or Redbox or whatever it is, you see a star that you've noticed, an actor that you're familiar with. There's a familiarity, sort of subconscious aspect of trust. Like, okay, if this particular star, but if you see a poster design that does it, you're probably less likely it, if 2 films look similar. So your barrier as anybody starting out is to help that customer overcome the trust factor, which is why we go back to permission marketing, is because you need to be authentic, as Chris has pointed out, so that you, the filmmaker, are going to be the trusted advocate for your film. So people only can trust you if they know you. First they got to know you, and then they got to then like you before they trust you. And if they have those 3 things in place, know, like, and trust, then they more likely will buy from you. And that's how you would market. And you have to, again, strategically analyze what your strengths are and overcome those barriers. And so that's really the value of what a star has. It gives you legitimacy. If you go to a film festival, if you're getting prominent reviews, then those little laurel leaves that go onto your film, that gives it sort of social proof. It gives it sort of validity that this could be trusted. So if you don't have any of those things in place, you didn't go to a film festival, you didn't have a star in place, what other ways can you generate that trust so the audience is more likely to accept the marketing that you're selling them? So that's something you have to think about.
Yeah, and I think, there's kind of an interesting psychology behind asking what to do, because it's a question that, given the information there, neither Scott nor I can answer what to do. We can't tell you how you should be tweeting, how often you should be tweeting. We can't really get down into the tactical level with that little information, because when I work with digital marketing clients, we do a lot of research, to kind of determine what exactly we should be doing. But what we can do for you is we can share strategies, these kind of bigger picture things, and then you can take them and you can apply them to your specific case, and you can kind of figure out the tactics from the strategy, which is kind of a more difficult way to get into that strategic thinking. But once you see these strategies and how they work, you can apply them to your case. So that's why that's why we can't tell you exactly what to do in your specific case, unless we do all of the work that goes into that, and then that gets to something where now you've taken a lot more than an hour and a half of my time, and we need to that's a different discussion about time and value. But we can share these strategies with you, and we can give them to you for free, but it's really up to you to activate them. And that's why, to me, it's really useful to look at what the big brands with all the money are doing, and look at if what they're doing is working and what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong, because you want to dissect it. You want to figure out the tactics behind it, just as how you would, watch Interstellar and dissect the cinematography behind it and find how you can apply that to you shooting a film probably on your DSLR or your, Canon C series or whatever it is that you have access to. You want to look at the people who are the best, you want to figure out why and how they're doing it, and you want to apply it to yourself and your situation.
That's a good point. I think the strategy is the best thing that we can offer. And so the only takeaway for those particular questions is ask yourself, how do I get people to trust me? That's pretty much it. I mean, starting with that question will lead you down a rabbit hole of like how to craft your marketing campaign or your marketing messages, all that kind of stuff. If you're always asking yourself, oh, how do I get, buyers to trust me? And that's pretty much it. I mean, to start, that's a great way to start, but
Yeah, I mean, trust is such an important thing, and I think, I'm really glad you brought up the 5 obstacles of sale because, again, like any business, where, you have those 5 obstacles, and you really need to work on them every time with every aspect of your film and your creative work. And with, the trust is the biggest one for the uber independent filmmaker because when we're honest with ourselves and you look at most uber independent films, there's a lot of them, and a lot of them aren't very good. And so you really need to, and that's your barrier to selling your uber independent film is getting people to believe that you're good.
yeah, you're good, you have value. Here's the next question. As I jump over here. Where'd it go? I'm locked out. Oh God, thank God, I'm back. Okay. Sorry, I got scared there. So this question comes from NZ Filmmakers Pod at NZ Filmmakers Pod, New Zealand, all over New Zealand. So what tips have you got for a first-time short movie producer hoping to hit the international film festivals? Okay. So the answer to this question real quick, this is important. I'm a first-time short films. Like I just made a film, I'm ready to hit the international market. So what tips do you have? Again, it's just measuring your expectations. Sort of like, do you expect to get picked up? Do you expect that your film's so wonderful that you're going to get a 3-picture deal from a producer? Most likely what happens in the world of shorts is just getting a chance to be invited to these film festivals, and if you can fund your travels to these particular film festivals that you are accepted into, is to enjoy but the whole thing when you get to but if you're trying to be strategic about how your film is played, especially with shorts, you don't have a lot of say sometimes. They're usually jammed in with like a half dozen other shorts, and you don't know necessarily when they're going to play. And a lot of film festivals sometimes you'd be surprised. It might be like, oh, I'm playing at 2 in the morning, or I'm playing at like 9 in the morning on like a Sunday morning, and the theater that they're going to be showing my film is it's in a gym. It's not even in a theater. They just put up some chairs, and it's in a gym at a middle school or a high school. So things like that, knowing kind of how your film is going to actually be played in these festivals, really helpful to measure your expectations and how to properly promote your film while you're at the festival. Because then, even though you're at a festival, the festival doesn't necessarily fill the seats. You, as a filmmaker, still have to show up. It's not unlikely to hear that some people have at their showing, they only had 8 people sit down at a film festival to see their film. Where you could easily get 8 people online to see your film. You could probably easily get 20 people to see it. So, measuring expectations. So the best thing about your journey with a short film going to all these international film festivals is what Chris and I were talking about, is really use it as a gateway to get in programmers. Find out who are the decision makers of that festival, because what happens if you give them like kudos, if you send them flowers as saying, I'm just so thankful to have my short film part of your festival, I had just a great time, or like here's some things that I loved about it, and maybe some things that can help to make it better. Trying to build that relationship, because what you're gaming on, you're hopefully banking on, is that you have such a great film festival people and so on, that when you come back with your next film, they already know who you are. And say you come back with a feature film, That's how it works for all these people that got into Sundance. Like if they get into Sundance with like a short film, those who work the networking angle to their advantage know that they can come back with a feature film. And I'm not, I'm not an expert in any of that kind of stuff, but Mark Duplass of the Duplass brothers just recently at South by Southwest had a whole proclamation, a keynote speech where he talks about this. He's like, you make a film on your iPhone right now, short film, get in festivals, work the festivals, network, and then get your film. He was saying basically get your film to actors, get them fans and try to work that angle. So then you write like a film for them, and then you're able to come back the next year to that same end with a feature, but with also an actor that has like a name to him. So then you have more. You are offering value to that festival and your career. So every step of the way they were leveling up. And again, if you get a chance, just Google Mark Duplass at South by Southwest 2015, and this tremendous keynote speech that'll help you, know what to expect if you're going to a lot of your first film festivals with your first short. So.
And I think this guy in New Zealand, he or she is at a great point to start doing some strategic thinking. So you've got a short film, or you're about to make a short film, and you want to hit some international festivals. So there's a lot of strategic thinking that you should do right now, and that will kind of guide your actions as you embark on this journey. And that is like, all right, one, like, what are my goals for this short film? Is my goal is there a feature that is kind of on the same concept, on the same story that exists in the same world? And is my goal with this short to kind of use it to get the attention of some people who might help me who might get me access to the resources to make the feature? Is it just to get into festivals, just to start meeting people, to open my network in that way? Is it to sell it? If it's to sell it, maybe a short film isn't necessarily the best vehicle. Maybe you want to kind of expand it to that, broadcast hour, that 45 minutes, so it's more market friendly, more sellable. So there's, kind of so you have all of that strategic thinking about the short film that you're going to make or have made. And then if you're looking at, so say, you're in New Zealand and you want to make some international festivals because New Zealand, a country on the smaller side, and you want to break out into larger markets. You want to reach, the worldwide film market. And so you want to look at the festivals that will give you access to this worldwide film market, and you want to look at what short films have done really well. Who won the Grand Jury Prize at South by Southwest this year? It was Pink Grapefruit, which was actually made by some guys I know, and it's really great. Check it out. Sorry for the plug, but kind of organic, had to happen. I wasn't even involved in it. I just know the guy, kind of know the producer. But, stuff like that. Like, so say you're targeting, Sundance and South by Southwest. You should go find the short films and even the features that did well at Sundance and South by Southwest over the last 2 to 3 years and watch them, and like take notes while you watch them and deconstruct them. And again, you're learning from the best, and you're learning what these festival programmers are expecting and what they're responding to. And then you can give them that. And that doesn't necessarily make your work derivative. It's just doing research for the business that you're building, the business of you as a creative worker, you as a filmmaker.
Yeah, definitely. Some good stuff there. That sounds cool. I can't wait to see it now. Now I have there's a connection. Here's the next question real quick as we power through this. Present this to everyone. Cool. This question comes from Cinecat at Slinky Malinky. I love that. How to find and build your audience online, and how to market an event screening. So there's 2 parts to this question, and these links may help. The first link, actually, over at filmtrooper.com, I have I'm making a video series on YouTube. I have 3 videos up so far. It's it's a case study, how to make a movie. Is how do you audience? And it's a 15-minute video that goes into watching me, right there online, just searching through Google Plus, Twitter, and Facebook as I target into specific groups, and then look for what the dialogue they're having, and then determining what value you're going to be providing them. And the other thing here is you asked about an event screening, and there's another link that you can grab, which is Think Globally, Act Locally, a film marketing case study. Again, a case study of what I used to hold a theatrical premiere for my film, The Cube. And really what you get out of that is this. In the short of it, when you're trying to build your audience, or how do you find your audience, as Chris was saying, there's strategically the end result, what you're going for. So we were using the case study of the marathon runners. So obviously that's easy. You just go to like a Google Plus communities or Facebook groups, and you're just typing in, marathon running groups, and you join those groups. Like you're just spending time listening to how people talk to each other, or like what kind of language do they use, or and then you have to ask yourself, like, if I were to make a film for this specific audience, what's the best film I can make for them? What value can I offer them? And you kind of have to be honest, because if you're a fan, like if you're a marathon runner and you're a fan, how would you like to be marketed to? How would you like a uber independent film to be presented to you? And what things need to take place to make you want to actually cough up some money? Not only money, but time. Because that is probably the most valuable thing that we're asking any of our audience to do, is give up time, because they have so many options now to do, to watch and to play video games, to just find entertainment all over the place. So you have to present it in such a way that you're asking, like, I'm just asking you to give up 2 hours of your life, and you're hoping that they get transformed from it. You're hoping that you have a product that's worthy enough, an experience worthy enough, that they're going to get something out of it. Again, the case study of The Room, world's worst movie ever made, right? Didn't matter. The people that chose to go to midnight screenings and be there in the theater, they were looking to be transformed to have an experience to share and a laugh, or just the absurdity of it all, about that. So you have to ask yourself, as you look into finding your audience, are you answering those questions? And the second part of that question is, okay, so now you're ready to put your film out to like a live event. Obviously, if you're going to go theatrical, there's great services like Tug or Gather, without the E, that help you get your film placed into theaters, as long as there's an audience willing to pay, But the way it works, like, you can do it on your own, is if you're gonna throw your own theatrical premiere, that can mean anything. It doesn't always have to be in a movie theater. It could be at a community center, or anything you get people together, as long as it's an event. But like, the question is, if you don't know anybody, sometimes the best way to throw an event is make it beneficial to those people showing up. For this particular film, The Cube, I was still fairly new to Portland, Oregon, so I didn't know a lot of the filmmaking community. So what I did was, there was a theater in town. I had to make sure there was a bar across the street, that after the event, I wanted to make sure that people had a very close proximity, a place to go and get some drinks, because I was thinking about the whole experience. I was go see the movie, and then you had to go find parking, 3 blocks down or whatever it was. So I made sure the venue had ample parking, that there was a bar across the street, so the whole to see the movie was going to be fun, because I planned events afterwards. But the biggest thing I did, which is what I learned from online, was that you got to have some reason for people to come together on a communal basis. Not because your film is not going to really sell it. There's nothing to it. There's no names. There's nothing. Just because you made it. By holding a networking event, I was honoring other filmmakers in town, showing their trailers of work they have done, and bringing them together so they can meet each other. At the same time, I gave them a silly award. And what you see, look at my finger here, this little mug back here was filled with some candy, and that was my award. And the thinking was, instead of getting a statue that probably is worth nothing, at least they get a free mug and some candy. But the whole point was, they brought their audience with them. I got a chance to honor with some silly award, but I brought people together. I brought a networking event together, and The Cube was just a side thing. So that's something you do with your theatrical working event.
Yeah, and
Correct,
I
Chris?
want to. Yeah, I'm back. I Chrome
Yeah, I saw
died again and came, so I'm back again. Again, if anyone wants to add value to me, tell me how to fix this, and I will repay you in helping you with your digital marketing. But I just want to say, like, events are so important. They are so incredibly important for your uber independent film, and you can do them on the cheap, and you can do them on the cheap, especially, like a lot of people feel hampered by the fact that they don't live in a New York or a Chicago or a Los Angeles. Well, here is one place where not living in New York or Chicago or Los Angeles will help you tons because you can get space for not an exorbitant amount of money, and you can do, an event around your film. You can invite the local filmmaking community. You can invite, whatever influencers you have access to, and that's something that, like, allows you to add value. And part of it's managing people's expectations. If you reach out to your influencer and you're like, "Hey, I want to invite you to my film premiere," like, don't talk like it's going to be, don't act like it's going to be a star-studded premiere at the Chinese Theater in Hollywood, California, when, they're screening your film at a dive bar in Vermont. It's fine to screen your film at a dive bar in Vermont, and in fact, you should if you live in Vermont and have a local dive bar, and especially if you have a film that's relevant to the people that hang out there. Like, I like Vermont. I'm not, I'm not hating on anything here. Don't get me wrong. It's just, manage the expectations of the people coming, and like Scott had for his premiere of The Cube, he had the whole night planned out. And he had, like, so if he managed to strike up a great conversation, he already knew there was a place where he could take these people. And, I don't know how he set it up, but I would bet that he probably went to that bar in advance and knew it wasn't going to be super crowded and super loud and super obnoxious. He might have even called them and been like, "Hey, I'm going to bring somewhere between 3 and 30 people to your bar on a Tuesday night. Like, is that okay?"
Yeah, it's exactly
you know, so again, it goes back to, like, that strategic thinking, and, kind of learning this way of thinking of, like, having plans for everything you're going to do, and know, like, just because you have a plan, you might have gone to that bar and it might be a Tuesday, and you might walk in and there might be someone having, like, a riotous birthday party, and it's like, "Oh, well, now there's a riotous birthday party here, so now, maybe it's not a quiet conversation about filmmaking, but, like, it's still your event and you still have to host it and you still have to own that." So you're like, "Okay, like, shots for everyone, we're joining in the party." Like, you got to provide value, you got to give people a good time. And I think, part of that's, like, coming off the event, like, events are unpredictable, be prepared to roll with the punches, but events are also super important. And, plan them out, do whatever you can to have a premiere at whatever level is accessible to you for your film, and to make it as great as you can make it. And I know that also, like, throwing events is something that's really terrifying. And I'm the kind of person who gets nervous about everything, so I overplan everything. um, but, like, I know that a lot of people, there's a lot of anxiety around throwing events. Like, is anyone, what if no one comes? Well, there's also a lot of really great resources to learn how to throw events. And, like, again, like, maybe you're not in a major city and you're like, "Well, who's going to teach me how to throw events in the town that I'm in?" I bet your town has a wedding planner. I bet that wedding planner would love, if you call every wedding planner in your town, I bet you can find one who would love to do a premiere for a movie. And these people are event planners, they're event organizers, kind of thinking that way, especially if your movie has a tie-in to their target market, especially if you have a wedding movie, definitely have a wedding planner, like, plan the premiere of your movie, kind of things like that. Or, also things like, where you're like, "Oh, I want to premiere my movie, but I don't have any money, I don't know anyone that has any space for me to premiere it, like, all I've got is a movie and I've got nothing else." Well, then you've got to kind of work the phone, and you've got to call up your local breweries and be like, "Hey, I've got this really awesome action movie. I really want to do a premiere for my action movie. You guys can slap your branding all over it. I'll make you an awesome flyer. You can be all over the Facebook event. I'll tweet at you all night long. But I just need a bar to show my movie in. Do you, as a local brewery, have a relationship with any local bars?"
Yeah, that's
Um,
perfect. Yeah.
There's lots of ways you can, whatever you need, there's a way to get it. You just have to, it goes back to like you either have to pay for it or you have to put in a lot of effort and be creative to get it.
Yeah, and don't, so if you can make a film, you probably can make a wedding video. You could, you know what I mean? So it's like you could exchange services for people you can benefit from their access. So hopefully that helps in terms of building an audience and also setting up your first screening or your event. And it is really helpful to try to know the things. Again, if we're doing like the marathon running example, if you were to plan an event where people get runners or half off entrance fee to the next marathon that's going to happen in that town, things like that, or you're going to show off the latest technology of shoes or energy bars or whatever, clothing. If you make it that kind of event, target audience there's going to be a greater experience for them. And think about it yourself. What would be the best experience for you? Or think about some of the best experiences you've ever had in terms of going to an event, and why did that work, and what a pleasurable experience create that for your own event. So we are in the home stretch. This is the last question. We have hit an hour and a half. It's a little longer than our normal Film Marketing Fridays, as I try to keep it to an hour. But this is a special one because we have Chris on as well as
Oh, shucks, I'm special.
Awesome. So, okay, so here it is. The last question is, how does online compare to theatrical distribution in terms of a film success and a potential return on investment? Let's see here. Suggestions. Let's stay. So here, the big gorilla. What animal is it? Is it an elephant? Room.
Yeah, elephant in the room.
But the reality is, it's like, well, how does online performance compare to a theatrical performance? And unfortunately, we hear those films that get successful theatrical run, and then translates to online. Where a lot of us, if we're especially the uber independent filmmaker, we are working in the world of direct digital distribution. So we are working online. And so I've been working on something that's definitely needed in the film industry, in the community, because a lot of filmmakers want to know what are the true numbers of video on demand. And we have to first clarify the difference between video on demand and digital downloads, or what is known in the industry as electronic sell-through. The reality is, uber independent filmmakers, they don't play in the world of video on demand. Every time you see something like VOD or VOD numbers or VOD success or whatever it might be in the blogosphere, it needs to be very clear that those numbers are related to cable video on demand, and those deals are being struck with formal distribution companies. So the uber independent filmmaker cannot judge the performance with their own performance, because the only thing we can deal with is digital downloads and electronic sell-through. And I'm going to show as I throw this up. I had this thing. I'm going to show you something I've been working on. I haven't released it yet because, well, I just haven't released it yet. But this is a report. Hopefully you guys can see this. I'm going to share this as it goes over here. Okay, you should be able to see this. All right, you guys see this little report? Okay, so to highlight it for you guys, I'm working on a Film Troopers video on demand and digital download report, and this is dated back in February 22nd, 2015. And the reason to use this report is, first off, is understanding the terminology. And I won't get into it too detailed here, but this report here shows video demand, MOD, VOD, SVOD, IOD. You're like, what the hell? This means like cable video on demand or transactional on demand, free on demand. There's also subscription cable video on demand, like HBO Go, SVOD, which is Netflix, an iVOD, which is or ad-supported VOD, which is like Hulu. So all this stuff doesn't mean anything to us, really, if you're the uber independent filmmaker, because if you do not have a distribution deal, companies are not talking to individual independent producers. They're talking to distribution companies. So when you see this terminology used, VOD, it's not being accurate because really what maker works in is digital downloads and streaming, or EST, for electronic sell-through. And again, this is not really part of VOD. This is not part of the numbers that includes iTunes, Amazon, and Google Play, or OTT, over the top, which is like media you get through like Apple TV, Roku Box, Chromecast, and Amazon Fire and whatnot. But this is electronic sell-through is really the world of Vimeo on demand, X as well. iTunes, and to get on Amazon and Google Play, you need to pay a flat fee to an aggregator, not a distributor, but an aggregator. An aggregator is just a service company, so that iTunes does not. The reason being is that iTunes doesn't want to deal with every single independent producer. They only have approved aggregators, and the aggregators are only there to make sure, mostly to make sure that your film product meets the technical specs for their player or their platform. So with that said, if you look at these numbers, I have to see if I can't zoom into this puppy so you can see it better. Okay, yeah. So like the performance of this comes from Rentrack in terms of they report the data of a VOD release and then estimated box office. But that doesn't tell you how much a film is going to be is making on video on demand titles of that week, and they show you the box office return. And then the digital downloads. This is EST. This is like the stuff that is not cable VOD. John Wick of this particular week, the Keanu Reeves film, was the #1 film, but it doesn't give you any data. It doesn't show you any numbers. So you're like, well, how the hell are you supposed to analyze this data? You know? So this is my guess. No things, and I don't get too there, but this will give you just a better gauge of how to determine performance between theatrical and VOD. So something like Dumb and Dumber, $1 million in the box office. You can, and Chris could attest to this in terms of the web metrics, the conversion rate. And Jason Brubaker over at filmmakingstuff.com wrote this great blog post like 5 years ago about conversion rates that the uber independent filmmaker really needs to understand these. So Dumb and Dumber 2 makes like $86 million. The conversion rate, you got to, we can guesstimate that it's anywhere between 5 to 15%, meaning that their estimated VOD return, the revenue is going to be anywhere between $4 to $13 million. Now, because Dumb and Dumber 2 was a studio film with high-profile stars, it's going to have a higher conversion rate. Something like a small film, like The Best of Me, made about $26.8 million box office, probably has a smaller advertising budget, and is only going to earn about maybe 1 to 8% return. And so their estimated VOD be about anywhere from $270,000. So what we can gather from this is like nowhere in this case scenario is like a movie making X suddenly making 300% on VOD. There's always going to be a much less conversion. And the case point we can look at is like the film The Interview. The Interview had all this press going around it, had all this controversy going around it, and it made around $41 million on VOD space. The film cost like $75 million, so it was kind of a loss. But that that had about a 30% conversion rate. So you can see if that is the case study of like the best possible case scenario in terms of performance on VOD based off all this press that goes around it is only maxing out about 30%. Then you can guesstimate that some of these smaller films, based on either their studio film or the ad budget or the impressions it gets online, you can gauge like a conversion rate anywhere from sometimes 1 to 8%, 3 to 10%, or 5 to 15%. Pitt's tank movie Fury is probably going to get a little bit more because he's international and he's a bigger star, so it's maybe like 10 to 20%. But the whole point is nothing in these case scenarios or these scenarios is a film on VOD suddenly making is what it made on the box office return. Now, if you go to digital downloads,
Oh, wait, before you move
yeah, yeah,
on
yeah.
from conversion rates, not to interrupt because you've got a lot of great stuff going on here, and I'm super excited about this report because I'm the kind of nerd who's like, yes, numbers and spreadsheets. Like, so when you look at these conversion rate numbers, kind of to give people who maybe don't have a little bit of a marketing background or a digital marketing background, like a frame of reference, when you look at e-commerce conversion rate, the standard conversion rate for basically selling anything online is a little bit below 3%. And when I work with companies, kind of no matter what when I work with consumer product companies, kind of across no matter what the consumer product is, if we're selling it online, I always shoot for a 5 to 15% conversion, which puts us, kind of a little bit above the middle of the conversion rate bell curve, and anything over 15% conversion rate online is, like a unicorn. It's incredibly rare. And so, when I looked at those conversion numbers, the first thing that jumped out to me was Fury is doing 10 to 20%. They are doing markedly better than anyone else at their conversion there. So I would look at Fury, I would look at like why is Fury converting so much better, because conversion, it's literally where the money's at. So if you only have, so much effort and so much marketing dollars put into something, you want to figure out what's converting for other people, and how you can really focus your efforts on doing the things that are converting, because those are the things that are putting money back in your pocket.
Right. It's a American comedy, so it's not going to translate as well overseas on the video on demand side. A proven genre that still holds true, even based off this interview I did with Scott Kirkpatrick over at Mar Vista Entertainment. He says like still action films do well, and Fury is a war drama, but it's marketed as an action film with Brad Pitt. So the odds are that conversion rate is gonna be higher. Again, we're using like sort of the interview as like the height. Like if they get a 30% conversion rate, if that's the highest you can go, and Chris was just saying like in normal metrics and marketing metrics, 3% or like 10, 15% is good, and anybody getting above that, you want to analyze why. Fury, because it's an action film with a big star, so it's going to get a bigger, higher conversion rate. Let me go back real quick to the slides. So as we go into this is the numbers that people probably want to know more, which is the world of the uber independent filmmaker. Again, you're not going to be working in video on demand world unless you have a distribution company. So you're going to be dealing with digital downloads. And so you probably want to know, like, well, how do you sort of guesstimate the conversion rate for digital downloads? So this particular week, John Wick was the top digital download, everything down to like Big Hero 6 and Gone Girl, and all the way down to Boyhood. And so this is a weird metric, but it's the best educated guess we can come from this. If you base it off the trailer views, and you do this by just going online and maybe just adding together all the trailer views that it has on YouTube and other sites, from the number of impressions that these particular films get, John Wick had like 12.8 trailer views, Big Hero 6 about almost 30 million, Boyhood had 14 million trailer views. You can almost apply the same sort of metrics, the conversion rate, and that's going to give you a transaction number. So John Wick being 12.8 million views, it was a Lionsgate film, it wasn't like a big budget film, it wasn't in the theaters that long, and so you're probably going to guess around like 3 to 10% conversion rate, meaning that equates about 300,000 to 1.2 million transactions at an average sell price of $8, anywhere from $5 rental per digital download or EST side is going to be about $3 to $9 million. The reason something like Big Hero 6 would get a higher percentage, one, it's a Disney film, one, it's a kids genre, and the higher sell price is because most of these type of children parents buy it because they need to have repeat viewing. So their average sell price is going to be more, yielding a much higher sort of potential revenue. 14 million views. Again, it's still an independent film, even though it got a lot of Oscar push. Maybe 3 to 10% conversion rate, and so you can kind of guesstimate sort of the transaction numbers and a price point between $5 and $10 rental, whatnot, or sale price. So even if I'm way off in prices, if it finally came out and says, Boyhood made, $56 million or whatever it might be, the whole point is it didn't make $300 million. Like, you're not going to see performances of like $100 to $300 million on digital downloads. So to better guess where your film could perform is these metrics. Like, if you have a star, and if you have a Lionsgate distribution and with a minimal marketing budget and exposure, you might be getting 3 to 10% conversion rate. But if you have a big studio backing, Big Hero 6, Fury, Gone Girl, we're talking big stars here, you might be seeing a 10 to 20% conversion rate. And this all comes down to this thing here, which is called, what is the 1% conversion rule? And Chris talked about like marketing, the metrics of 3% being quite normal. Actually, 1% is quite normal too. And here are some examples as I zoom into this. Here are some examples of the 1% conversion rule in fact in terms of electronic sell-through. There's a film that did very well in the blogosphere and on some film festivals called The Layover. It had about 80,000 trailer views. The transactions eventually came out to be about 800 transactions at an average sale price of $6, and they made $4,800. And this is the URL source where I got those numbers. There's another case in point, Escape from Tomorrow, this film that was shot in Disneyland that nobody knew about, was acquired by, I forget, John Sloss's company. But it had about 1.2 million trailer views, so you can guesstimate that the 1% transaction from that, 1% of 1,200 transaction numbers times $10 gives you about $100, which is what made digital downloads, electronic sell-through, not video on demand. Video on demand will actually yield them a higher return, but they have to pay percentages to the cable company, percentages to the distribution company, and so on. This is just straight digital downloads. This is the world that Uber Independent Filmmaker is working. American, the Bill Hicks story, the Film Collaborative did a really great case study and numbers on this particular film. It had about 795,000 trailer views, and 1% of that is almost 8,000 transactions at $7 a pop. They earned about $55,000 in electronic sell-through revenue. And again, and this link provides a much thorough case study of that particular film. You'll see that it actually made more because it did theatrical, and it also did VOD, but it had a film distribution company behind it. But if you look at the EST numbers, this is what it's working. And again, the magic 1% rule, conversion rate rule, is in full effect. And you got this film that kind of looked like a bomb, a Keanu Reeves film, Man of Tai Chi, earned about 9.5 million trailer views, and then had about 95,000 transactions at $10 a pop. It made probably under $1 million. And again, there's reporting the sources here. So by gathering these numbers, I was able to give sort of a best estimated guess, the best educated guess I could, based off the numbers that are coming through Rentrack that reports how well certain VOD movies are doing versus how well digital download movies are doing, and then for the Uber Independent Filmmaker to understand, like, what, the most conservative effort you can use is use the 1% conversion rule, meaning that this bottom line is this. As I go to my face, Based
Oh,
off the number of trailer, oh, sorry, based off the number of trailer views that you get online, you can guess that about 1% of that will turn into people actually buying your film or renting your film. So that helps your gauge and your projection. But you're going to say something. Go ahead, Chris.
yeah, I was just gonna say, it's like again, these numbers are super powerful, and you can't really, as you look at yourself as a filmmaker, and the business of you as a filmmaker, like your 1% conversion rate is your minimum estimated return on your investment. So when you look at that 1% and you see like the guys who did Layover, I saw Layover. It's a great film. They made it for $7,000 at a 1% estimate. They lose money, and so they have to convert at higher than 1% because they need to make their money back so they can go on to make another film. And it's great to kind of look at this data, which is really important to you as a filmmaker. And you're like, all right, if I spend $5,000 making The Cube, and I know at least 1% of the people who watch my trailer are going to watch it because that's what all of the data on e-commerce tells me. I know that at least 50,000 people have to watch. I'm sorry, 500,000 people have to watch my trailer. So that means that I have to, so now I have a benchmark of how much effort I have to do to hit my return on investment point. Um,
Yeah, and that
so
goes like
that's why
full.
these numbers are really important. And also pulling the data from it, and when you look at those and you're like, oh, like, at the 1% level, these films lost money. Let's look at what they did. Let's look at what their marketing message was and try to extrapolate from that marketing message why so many people watched the trailer, but only 1% bought the film.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, we're hitting 2 hours, man. This is probably the longest. I don't know if anybody stayed around, but the good thing is that it'll be recorded so people can watch it. And then I actually add annotated chapter links so you can quickly pop through the different topics we talk about. So it'd be a little bit easily digestible in later events. So um, as we wrap up, we probably should wrap it up. Let me just do my little bit of housekeeping here, which is this. The one really thing to take from all this is be focused on what results you want. Chris just said it. It's like if you know that you need to make X amount of sales, then that will lead you down a rabbit hole of what proper questions you need to ask. If you want to have a great experience at a film festival your first time around, be very clear what you want to. Those will set you up for asking the right questions that lead you down a rabbit hole so you can come up with the best strategy. So with all that said, if any of you are stuck trying to make, then I encourage you to go over to freegearguide.com where you can get a free equipment list of everything I use to make my feature film for $500 with no crew. And so there shouldn't be any reason that you should be stuck with yours if I can make something that small as well, because that way you can at least look at what equipment was used, find inspiration, and then say, you know what, I can make something in my own house and get going. Again, at freegearguide.com. I want to say, have Chris say any last parting words. Oh, hit your mute. There you go.
Sorry, I was having trouble clicking the mute button. Yeah, I just want to say thanks a lot for having me on here, Scott. I hope that I was able to provide some value to you and your listeners. Obviously, I'm a big fan of what you do at Film Trooper. I like the attitude of not letting anyone say no, and I like that you're kind of sharing your learning with me and the rest of the world. So, yeah, thanks for having me on. Anyone out there who wants to talk to me, you can find me on Twitter at It's Chris Reed, ITSCHRISREED. And reach out to me if you have a question to ask. I'll do my best to help out when I can.
Very cool. Any latest projects that pop up for you, and as other marketing questions pop up, I'll definitely, tweet you and hit you up on Twitter. Thank you for everyone who stayed around. I know this has been an epic session, but I can't submitted questions, and I hope we did our best to answer something to give you guys enough value to move forward, to have a much bigger perspective. With that knowledge is power in your hands so that you know what to do with it moving forward with your film project. So we wish you all the best. And we'll see you next time. And you can just follow me over at FilmTrooper on Twitter, or just go to filmtrooper.com. And that's it. We can wrap it up here with my closing screen and say good night. There's a pause. So dramatic. Lots of dramatic pause. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Signing off.